Hi, coaches. Welcome back to Big to Rule the World. This is Coach Allen. I'm broadcasting to you from my new classroom. That's sort of been part of the reason we've had the sort of on again, off again thing going in terms of our episodes going. But I wanted to sort of crank out an episode today. We have a pause practice right now because of the heat. We're not going to get practice until tonight. I hope you all are staying cool and keeping your kids cool mostly. You don't want to have those guys out there in the heat too much. We're trying to get something done. We'll get it done tonight from 6 to 8. All right, 6 to 8:30 tonight. So I'm cranking out a video right now. One of the things I want to talk about today, we're picking back up on our spread series, and we're talking about history of the air raid. Specifically, hold on one second, coaches. Sorry, guys. Talking about history of the air raid today. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I studied it a lot. One of the guys I want to talk about here, and I got to making a PowerPoint, and then I was like, do I really need to? Do I really need to? And I decided not to, for multiple reasons. I decided not to really dive too in. Now you're seeing my classes stuff. Hopefully I can get it. If I could get it to work, that'd be fantastic. There we go. History of the air raid. History of the air raid starts out first. I just did it sort of, guys. I know most of you probably know this. You might want to skip this video and talk about how I taught kids 4 verticals and how I teach it kind of like Mike Leach does. Maybe not. Hal Mummy and Iowa Wesleyan. So air raid goes back to a guy named Hal Mummy, who starts out in a little small college in Iowa Wesleyan. Think they're the equivalent like NAIA right now. Goes there and sort of recreates in this little cornfield. There are a couple different books. I love Stretching the Cornfield. Brings in this guy named Mike Leach, who's really a former law school student, former BYU student, kind of a little crazy, eccentric guy to be his offensive line coach. And they work together to make the air raid offense. Ultimately, Hal Mummy would be let go at Iowa Wesleyan, not for lack of success. The school turns from a doormat into a playoff team in the NAIA playoffs, goes down to Valdosta State. Mike Leach actually sort of sells their offense all around the country after Hal Mummy was getting let go at Iowa Wesleyan. He sent off VHS tapes and dubbed it the air raid for how much they were throwing the ball around, a lot of it based on what LaBelle Edwards was doing at BYU, among other things. From there, they would take that and they would go to, from Valdosta State, actually get the job at Kentucky. And at Kentucky, they would be responsible for bringing them. I mean, you think about great quarterbacks. Tim Couch was a Hal Mummy quarterback. Jared Lorenzen was an air raid quarterback at Kentucky. All right, he loses Mike Leach, and the Mike Leach tree sort of starts. You know, Hal Mummy eventually gets let go of Kentucky for recruiting violations. Hal Mummy, kind of the guy who begins the air raid, but does he ever really win championships with it is all the question mark. I'll have a lot of air raid guys hit me up on that one. Hey, guys, I'm an air raid guy too at heart. The Leach tree. So Mike Leach takes off. He goes and becomes the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. And you see, guys, I don't have any notes on this. This is stuff I just know. He becomes the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma for Bob Stoops for a year before landing the Texas Tech job. He becomes the head coach at Texas Tech, becomes sort of known for taking dormant programs and turning them around. He turns Lubbock. This is when the air raid was really a big deal to me, and some of my younger guys might not know this, but I think the season was a 2008 season, 2007, 2008 season, one or the other there, when Michael Crabtree caught a pass from Graham Harrell to score and beat Texas. That year, the Big 12, this would have been 2008, I think, because 2007 was just a wild, wacky year. But 2008, 2009, Mike Crabtree, Texas Tech, that was when the Big 12 had Texas Tech, Texas, Oklahoma. All 3 of them couldn't compete for a national title that year. Mike Leach, unfortunately, after his top guy, and Mike Crabtree was like the #1 receiver in the nation, just pandemonium when Texas Tech beats Texas in Lubbock. This is back in the Colt McCoy era too. I mean, just pandemonium. All three of those teams, just very good, very solid teams. Then Mike Leach gets to let go of Texas Tech. Some other guys that he would, and he eventually works his way down to Washington State, and now to Mississippi State. He's had success along the way at Washington State, bringing them into relevancy. We'll see what he does in Mississippi State besides just knock off LSU in his first game there. Next thing we talked about some of the other people. I have a picture up here of Dana Holgorsen, but there are plenty more guys. So Dana Holgorsen works for Mike Leach. We talked about the success he's had at West Virginia, now at Houston. We could talk about Tony Franklin, the Tony Franklin system. He worked for Hal Mumme at Kentucky. We could talk about tip of my tongue, Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma comes to Texas Tech, is not a very good football player. Well, was a great football player in a small town. Can't cut at Texas Tech. They stays on there, eventually becoming a student assistant, and then finally getting a position coach, one of the youngest position coaches in the country, I think, at the time. And then Lincoln Riley goes to ECU, becomes the offensive coordinator for Ruffin McNeil. Then Bob Stoops, the guy who took Mike Leach from Hal Mumme, takes Lincoln Riley from Ruffin McNeil and sort of brings that air raid offense back. So you think of a tough defensive guy like Bob Stoops, he wanted an air raid type offense. Right, and these offenses based around stretching the field both horizontally and vertically. And as passed around, I could get going with the tree. You talk about the tree has now stretched itself where Graham Harrell is the offensive coordinator at USC. It stretched itself where Cliff Kingsbury was at Texas Tech. Now he's at the Arizona Cardinals. These are the type of guys that have stretched the air raid tree and sort of tinkered with it where, now we have RPO game, now we have power run game. I used to tinker with it and mix air raid and power run game for me. You do take all that and you sort of mix it all together and you've created the modern day air raid, which is its own entity. And what are some of the stalwarts of the modern day air raid? 4 verticals, mesh. To me, if I'm talking about now, people will get in and they'll talk about the specific terms. I should be using the 90s terms. I want to talk about 4 verts. I want to talk about mesh. I talked about mesh when I talked about Lavelle Edwards. So my next video, we're going to talk about how to run 4 verts and how to run it the air raid way. All right. Until next time, coaches. Remember, if you want to win ball games, you got to win on the scoreboard. If you want to win on the scoreboard, you got to dominate in the trenches. If you want to dominate in the trenches, you got to remember that bigs rule the world. I'll see you next time, coaches.